Cowboy discovers bride alive on horse, believed dead. Her shocking past changes everything. A grieving cowboy, hardened by exile, crosses paths with a woman he thought lost forever, and the two children who bind them in silence. As winter closes in, their shared past threatens to thaw what survival has kept buried. In a land that forgets nothing, confound family outrun the truth. There's a comfort in the sound of kettle steam and boots drying by the fire, a kind of peace only found out west after the day's dust settles. Folks in Willow Creek remember that summer well. 3 months earlier, July 1879, the sun burned gold across the Wyoming plains, and the town fair sparkled like a promise. That's when folks first noticed Clara Monroe slipping away from her father's side, lace hem lifted, eyes fixed on the wrong kind of man. A ranch hand with calloused hands and no name worth mentioning. Love doesn't ask permission out here, it just takes root. Sometimes the family you choose is the one fate blows in with the storm, the kind that don't knock, don't ask, don't wait, just arrive like ghosts with the snow, cold in their eyes, carrying a silence louder than any gunshot. You don't get to question it, not out here. You take what comes, or you die waiting for what never will. The wind out here don't just bite, it remembers, whispers names you thought you buried, carries the weight of footsteps long gone, voices you ain't heard in years, and the kind of regret that don't warm by any fire. There's a grave behind my cabin where the snow never stays long, just melts like it don't belong there, like the ground itself won't let the past rest easy. Folks say time heals, but time don't ride up with the face you thought you lost, alive and breathing and looking straight through you like she's seen a ghost. She had children with her, and that changed everything. Now the fire crackles, the snow falls again, and I sit here wondering if maybe I'd been dead this whole time, and they just brought me back. The wind hadn't let up in 3 days, not fierce enough to kill a man outright, but sharp enough to keep his face wrapped and his eyes down. Snow had crusted hard against the pines, bowed the roof beams, and creaked the walls like they were speaking in their sleep. The kind of cold that didn't just get in your bones, it settled there, made a home of you. He rose before the sun, same as always, stirred the coals in the hearth till they glowed again, then fed them pine kindling and a twist of birch bark. The flame caught slow, sullen. No rush. There was no one to beat to the fire but himself. He moved quiet, heavy, pulled on boots stiff with frost, rubbed cracked hands together, flexed the fingers where an old break hadn't healed right. The cabin groaned when he stepped outside, like it missed him the moment he left. The sky was the color of iron, the kind of grey that made a man forget there ever was a summer. He chopped wood by the shed, the rhythm dull and steady. Whump, crack, whump. His breath came in clouds, his shoulders ached, the axe bit clean. When the pile was high enough, he stopped and just stood there, listened. Nothing. No birds, no critters, just the wind dragging its fingers through the trees. He looked out across the ridge, where the valley disappeared into a sweep of white. Somewhere down there, folk still lived. Drank coffee, talked over fence rails, laughed maybe. He hadn't laughed in, well, best not try and count it. He turned back to the cabin. Inside, on the mantel, a stack of letters sat tied with a strip of buckskin, still sealed, yellowed at the edges, his name written in a hand he used to know by heart. He didn't touch them. Near the hearth, a wooden box held a child's toy horse, rough carved, unpainted, one leg broken. He picked it up once in a while, never fixed it. Behind the cabin, under the leaning pine, a small wooden cross stuck from the earth, no name, no date. He never marked it proper, couldn't bring himself to. He poured himself coffee strong enough to strip paint, sat down by the fire, and stared into it like a man might find answers in flame. Somewhere in his chest, something had gone quiet. Not dead. Not yet. Just waiting. Up here there were no lies, no time for stories, only what a man could carry on his back, and the things that wouldn't let go, no matter how far he rode. The wind turned mean sometime after nightfall, not just cold now, but cutting, alive in its fury. It screamed down off the ridge, flung loose branches like knives across the clearing, rattled the shutters till the nails groaned. Snow swirled sideways, thick and angry, white as bone and just as unforgiving. Inside, the fire was steady, but small. He kept it low to stretch the woodpile. Winter had teeth left, and he'd learned not to trust the calendar when it said spring was close. He'd just set his tin cup down, coffee long gone, taste bitter and thin, when he heard it. At first he thought it was the wind again, shifting tones like it did, catching in the chimney or howling down the stovepipe. But then it came again. A thud, soft, muffled. Then another, like something hitting the door but too weak to knock. He stood slowly, reached for the Winchester, leaning by the table. Habit, not fear. Out here things came uninvited, and not all of them walked on two legs. He unlatched the door with care, cracked it open a hand's width, and the storm shoved in like a drunk. Snowflakes swarmed the cabin's warmth, and the cold punched through like it meant to finish what time had started in his bones. Then he saw the shape. A horse, barely upright, steam rising off it in gusts, its eyes wild, half-frozen. Rider slumped forward, arms wrapped tight around two smaller figures. Children. He blinked against the snow. It didn't change. The woman was near limp, her face white under a crust of ice, hair plastered to her cheeks. One of the children stirred weakly, pressed deeper into her side. The other was motionless. His jaw clenched. Every part of him wanted to step back, shut the door, pretend he hadn't seen it. Not out of cruelty, just the old instinct to survive. Strangers meant trouble. Trouble meant blood. But something rooted him. He moved fast then, stepped into the snow, teeth bared to the cold, grabbed the woman by the shoulders as she slid from the saddle. She didn't speak, didn't groan, just slumped into him like a bundle of rags, the weight of her and the children nearly pulling him down. He carried them inside, one at a time. Didn't think, just moved. Set them near the fire, stripped soaked coats, unwrapped scarves stiff with ice. The girl's lips were blue. The boy coughed, a dry, shivering sound. The woman's eyes fluttered open, then shut again. He worked in silence, boiled water, cut old blankets into strips, held the boy's hands in his, rubbed warmth back in. The girl clung to her mother, even unconscious. When it was done, when the fire was roaring, steam rising from their thawing clothes, and the storm screaming outside like it knew it had been beaten, he sat back against the far wall, rifle still across his knees. They didn't belong here, but they were here now. The cabin never felt smaller. Firelight flickered low along the log walls, casting long shadows that danced slow and strange. The woman lay still on the cot near the hearth, steam rising off her coat as the ice gave way to heat. Her hair clung damp to her neck. Her breath came shallow, not labored, just worn down, like someone who'd run too far and too long and finally laid her burdens down, if only for a moment. The children huddled close, one on either side of her. The girl was maybe 8, though it was hard to say in the dim. Long limbs, sharp eyes. She hadn't spoken once since he'd brought them in. Just sat there, wrapped in one of his old wool shirts, staring at the fire like it owed her something. The boy was younger, 5, maybe 6, thinner. His cough came and went like an echo. He didn't cry, didn't ask where they were, just leaned into his sister and sucked his thumb like it was a job. He kept to his corner, watched them from his chair, boots still on, coat slung over the table behind him. He didn't move unless he had to. The fire cracked and settled. The storm hissed at the windows, but it couldn't get in. He'd seen folks freeze before, seen what the cold did to skin, to breath, to bone. They hadn't been far from it. Another hour, maybe 2, and this would have been a burial instead of a rescue. Or maybe both. He got up once to ladle out stew. Thin broth, a piece of rabbit, some beans gone soft. No salt left in the tin. He set the bow near the woman but didn't wake her. The girl looked at it, then at him, didn't reach. "Eat," he said, voice low and rough. "Ain't poison." She didn't smile, just picked up the spoon and nudged it toward her brother first. He took a sip, then gave it back. He went about chores quiet, hung their wet clothes by the fire, laid out spare blankets, stoked the coals. They watched him like stray dogs, half hope, half fear. The kind of watching that ain't about curiosity. It's about measure, whether a man is safe, whether he'll stay that way. Later, when the woman stirred, she sat up too fast and winced. She looked at him like she was seeing a bear in her kitchen. He stayed seated, palms open. "You're safe," he said. "Storm'll ride out by morning." She nodded once, slow, looked to her children. "They all right?" "They're breathing." She let out a breath, more tremble than sound. He waited. "Eliza," she said, voice rasped raw. "Clara's the girl. Tommy's the boy." He nodded once. "You can call me whatever you like. Don't matter." She blinked at that. Didn't ask his name. A long silence followed, not awkward, just full, the kind that stretched between folks who'd both seen too much and knew not to poke the wound too soon. "Why'd you help us?" she asked finally. He stared into the fire for a beat, then, "Seemed wrong to leave you to the wolves." She didn't answer, didn't need to. The girl, Clara, watched him with her mother's eyes. Unblinking. Measured. She held the bowl close to her chest now, spoon still inside. Protective. Tommy had curled into the blanket like a pup. His face had softened, breath evening out. He was asleep before the quiet returned. He laid another log on the fire. The flames jumped, light washing over old scars on his hands. He caught Eliza watching them. She looked away fast. "I'll sleep by the door," he said, "in case something tries to come through." She nodded again, but her gaze lingered longer this time, like she was weighing something. Trust, maybe, or memory. The wind scraped once more across the roof, then fell away. He leaned back in his chair, rifle across his knees, eyes never closing. The cabin was warm, but the cold still lingered. The days passed, quiet as breath in a church. Snow softened, though it never stopped falling, just got gentler, like winter had used up most of its fury and was now just keeping watch. He kept his distance, chopped wood like it owed him something, shoveled paths that didn't need walking. He moved with a steady rhythm, not quick, not slow, just the kind of steady that said he'd done this 1,000 times before, and didn't much care to stop now. The girl, Clara, watched him often from the porch steps, boots too big, coat cinched with twine. She didn't speak unless spoken to, and even then, her answers came thin and sharp-edged, like flint. But her eyes had questions they didn't make words for. Tommy was different. Quieter still. He took to the cabin like he'd lived in it his whole life, followed Eliza around with a kind of solemn loyalty, then took to watching the man in the same way, not with fear, just waiting, like he figured something was bound to break sooner or later, and he wanted to see how bad it'd be. At night, the table filled, 4 plates, though one always stayed half full. He didn't speak much over supper, asked what needed asking. "You eat? You warm?" Nothing more. Words didn't come easy no more, and when they did, they carried weight he wasn't sure anyone wanted. But one night, Eliza sat long after the children had curled up near the hearth, their breathing slow and full. She didn't speak either, not right off, just watched the fire, hands around a mug of tea gone cold. "You got a family?" she asked, voice like old cloth, soft, fraying. He didn't look up. "Had." "Gone long?" He nodded. "Long enough?" Clara had drawn something that day, scratched into a scrap of pine bark with charcoal, all from the stove. She'd left it on the table. He'd seen it. 3 stick figures holding hands. One stood apart, bigger, alone. He hadn't touched it. Eliza ran her thumb along the rim of her mug. "He their father?" "No." She waited. He didn't add more. "I had a husband," she said after a spell. She stopped, swallowed. "He's not with us. Ain't been for a while." He glanced at her then. Her face didn't give much away, but her hands had gone still. "You running from someone?" he asked, flat. She nodded, slow. "A place. A man. Both." The wind scratched at the door again. Not fierce, just enough to remind them it was there. He leaned back, creaking the chair beneath him, looked to the fire. "My boy's buried out back." Eliza didn't speak. Named him Levi, didn't make it past 5. He let the silence settle around the name. He was loud, never sat still, drove his ma near mad. A faint curve at the edge of his mouth, not quite a smile. I used to yell at him for it. Now the quiet. "It don't sit right." She stared at the flames, eyes glossed with something old, something that had been waiting to be seen. "Clara, don't laugh," she said. "Not since Kansas." He didn't ask what happened in Kansas. Later, as the fire died low and shadows stretched longer than the walls should allow, he stood and moved toward the door. "Need anything?" he said. "You knock once. I'll hear." She nodded. "Thank you." He paused. "You're welcome to stay through the thaw." She watched him go. Her eyes lingered on his back, the slope of his shoulders, like she saw the weight there. He stepped out into the cold, shut the door behind him. Inside, the fire flickered soft. Clara rolled in her sleep. Tommy let out a sigh, deep and content. Eliza looked at the picture on the table. 3 figures holding hands, one standing apart. She picked up the charcoal and drew a 4th. The thaw came quiet. One morning the snow was soft underfoot, not frozen stiff. The icicles hanging off the eaves broke loose one by one, tapping out some slow, patient rhythm against the porch rails. Streams ran thin through the woods, cutting muddy paths between trees still bare of leaf. The sky, pale and colorless, looked tired from the long freeze. He knew the signs. Winter giving up its grip, not all at once, but enough to loosen the world. Eliza noticed too. Her eyes moved different now. Less weighed down by survival, more like a woman looking down a long road, wondering how much of it she still had left in her legs. That morning she stood at the edge of the field, shawl pulled tight, watching the tree line. He didn't say anything, just split logs like always, axe clean through the heart of pine. But he felt her thinking, felt the shift in the air around her. Later, over supper, she spoke plain. "We'll leave come morning." The words landed soft, but sharp. He chewed slower, didn't look up. "Where to?" She shrugged. "Where no one knows our names. East, maybe south. Somewhere folks mind their business." The children didn't react. Clara kept drawing lines on a scrap of bark. Tommy traced circles in his stew with the back of his spoon. This wasn't the first time they'd left a place, maybe not even the 10th. He nodded once, didn't argue. That night he sat outside long after they'd gone to sleep, rifle across his lap, boots in the dirt. The stars were out for the first time in weeks, cold, far-off things, didn't care about people or what they did. He listened, to the trees creaking, to the wind winding low through the grass, to the cabin behind him, still but alive with breath not his own. He stood once, walked to their door, didn't knock, just stood there, hand on the wood, eyes closed. Inside he heard Eliza's voice, soft, tired, reading from a worn Bible she kept folded in a rag near her things. "Yea, though I walk through the valley." He stepped back, not for fear, for something heavier. Come morning they packed. She moved like someone who'd done it too many times to count. Neat, quiet, quick. He didn't offer help, just watched. When they were saddled and the children mounted, Clara sitting proud, Tommy holding the reins like he might cry, Eliza turned to him. "I thank you for the fire, the food, the roof." He nodded. "Weren't charity, just seemed right." She held his gaze a long time, then, You ever been to Wichita? Once. I might head that way. He squinted into the sun, then said, Wichita's no kinder than anywhere else. She smiled just a little. Maybe not, but it's somewhere. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small tin box bent at one corner. Money inside, he said. Not much. Enough to eat for a while. She stared at it, unmoving. Won't take it. He didn't move either. Ain't a gift. Call it trade. For the stew you made. For the book readings. For drawing on my table. After a beat, she took it, slipped it into her saddlebag without thanks. Tommy looked at him then. The boy raised a hand, not quite a wave, just something close to goodbye. Clara didn't look back. They started down the trail, hooves sucking through soft mud, the sound of their leaving loud in the quiet morning. He watched until the trees swallowed them whole, didn't move, didn't go inside right away, just stood there, sun on his face, door open behind him. Maybe the silence had gotten too quiet. Maybe he'd gotten used to the weight of other lives rustling around him like wind through dry grass. He didn't know if they'd come back. But that night, he left the lamp burning. Dust rose slow behind the wagon wheels, curling through the hot wind like ghosts too stubborn to lie still. The town sat squat and tired against the horizon, buildings leaning slightly as if worn down by years of hard weather and harder people. A crooked sign creaked over the livery. Dry Creek. Fitting. He rode in beside the wagon, reins loose in his calloused hands, eyes ahead but seeing everything. Eliza drove. Tom, sat between them, boots swinging. Clara rode her own horse, a hand-me-down paint mare with a quiet gait and a stubborn streak. She sat tall, chin high, eyes scanning every face that turned their way. And there were many. The town wasn't big, 2 streets and a row of false fronts, but word traveled faster than horses out here. By the time they reached the mercantile, whispers had started, the kind folks think you can't hear, but you do. You always do. That him? Thought he was dead? She don't look like his kin. Poor children. No father to speak of, and taken up by a ghost. Eliza stepped down from the wagon and tied the reins without a word. She wore the same grey dress she'd arrived in, mended at the hem, sun-faded at the shoulders. Didn't matter. She stood like she belonged wherever she stood. That was enough. Tommy tugged at her sleeve. Can I have peppermint? Maybe, she said, brushing his hair back. We'll see what they have. Inside the store, it was quiet. Too quiet. The clerk, a thin man with a mustache that looked pasted on, offered a nod but no greeting. Sugar, flour, salt, Eliza said, placing coins on the counter. A jar of pickles if the price ain't robbery. The clerk glanced at the man beside her. You paying for this? He met the man's eyes, didn't blink. You taking her money or not? The clerk looked down quick, started filling the order. Tommy wandered near the candy jars, nose close to the glass. Clara stayed near the door, watching the street like she expected something or someone to come charging through it. They left with supplies bundled in burlap, loaded into the wagon bed. Just as they stepped out, a voice cut through the stillness. Eliza? The name stopped them all. She turned slow. A man stood across the street, broad-shouldered, hat low over his brow, wearing a preacher's collar that looked too clean for this par. It of the world. Didn't expect to see you again. Her voice was flat. That makes 2 of us. The preacher crossed the road, his boots kicked up dust. You traveling with this man? She glanced at him, just a flicker, then back at the preacher. I'm not traveling, I'm living. The preacher looked him over, eyes sharp as fence nails. This your husband? No, he said before Eliza could speak. Ain't no papers between us. The preacher turned his gaze to the children. These kids need the word, Eliza. They need guidance, not... He trailed off, nose wrinkling. Tommy stepped behind her. Clara didn't move. Eliza's voice never rose. "You had your chance to offer that when we needed it." The preacher blinked. She added, "And I'll thank you not to speak to my children again unless you're asked." They left him standing there, boots rooted, mouth halfway to another sermon. At the edge of town, another man stood. This one didn't wear a collar, just a badge, rusted some at the edge. "Name's Carson," the lawman said. "Heard a fellow with a scar across his cheek rode in. That you?" He nodded. "Used to be." Carson chewed the inside of his cheek. "Ain't seen you since '81. Thought you were 6 feet under." "Was close. You bringing trouble with you?" He looked at Eliza, at the children, then back at Carson. "No more than most." The lawman held his stare, then gave a nod that didn't mean much. "You stir nothing. Nothing stirs you. That fair?" "Fair." They rode out slow, sun sinking low, dust curling up behind them again. Tommy held a peppermint in his hand, unwrapped but uneaten. Clara leaned forward in her saddle. "Can I go to school here?" Eliza didn't answer right away. "Maybe," the man said. "If they let you." She looked over at him. "And if they don't?" He thought a moment. "Then we build our own." She smiled, just barely, then faced forward again. Behind them, Dry Creek shrank to a silhouette in the dusk, a place with more past than future, and ahead, nothing certain but the trail and each other. The wind that night was low and scent, eddy, like a breath drawn in but never let out. Firelight flickered against the walls of the cabin, throwing long shadows across worn floorboards and the edges of a life halfway rebuilt. The children had gone quiet early. Tommy curled on his side beneath a quilt. Clara still clutching the book she'd fallen asleep reading, her hand resting gentle on its spine like it might keep her dreaming longer. He sat in his chair near the stove, boots off, socks worn thin. Eliza moved soft through the room, folding shirts, stacking dried herbs back in their place, clearing away the last of the supper plates. She didn't hum, didn't speak, just worked like silence was a second language she knew well. When she finally sat, across from him beside the fire, she didn't look tired, just used up in a way that came from too many years with no one to lean against. He cleared his throat once, then again. She raised her eyes. "I ain't much for talkin' feelings," he said. "Ain't much for askin' things, neither." She waited. He ran his thumb along a chip in the armrest. "But it's getting colder again, and I don't reckon the world's getting easier anytime soon. Not for you, not for them." Still she said nothing. He looked up. His eyes were steady, not pleading, not soft, just plain. "You can take my name." A pause. "Not 'cause I'm sweet on you, though I might be. I don't rightly know, but I got land, a roof that don't leak, 2 milk cows and a fence that needs fixin' most days. It ain't love I'm offerin', it's survival, stability maybe, a place to belong, if that means anything." She stared into the fire. The logs popped once, sudden, like a shot out in the woods. He waited, didn't press. Finally she looked at him. Her voice came quiet. "I've had a husband before. It ended with blood in the yard and a preacher who wouldn't bury him." He nodded. "I know. I'm not sure what I be. Leave in anymore. I ain't asking you to." Her hands rested in her lap. She looked older in the firelight, not in years, just in the weight she carried. "You'd take my children. They already live here. And me." He swallowed. "You do what you want. Stay, go. But if you stay, I'll build on that back room like I said I would. You won't owe me nothing, but this place'll be yours same as mine." She leaned back, arms crossed over her chest. Not cold, just wrapping herself in something invisible. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. But she didn't pack, didn't ready the horses. And when the fire burned low and the lantern guttered down to just a glow, she stayed sitting by the hearth, boots still on, eyes on the dying embers. He stood, stretched, and picked up a log, set it on the coals, slow. It caught after a moment. She looked up at the flame, and he saw it, just for a second. Not trust, not love, but the smallest beginning of willing. Morning came quiet, as it often did out there. No bells, no clocks, just the slow bloom of pale light on frost-tipped grass and the soft creak of the windmill turning steady in the wind. The cabin stood the same, though its bones had been added to. Rough lumber now framed a second room, and a porch stretched its arms out front like a welcome the place had once been too afraid to offer. Clara rode circles in the pasture on a buckskin gelding, bareback, hair trailing wild behind her. She was taller now, voice stronger, eyes sharp like her mother's. She had a rifle strapped to the saddle just in case, and rode like the horse was part of her. Tommy sat cross-legged by the barn, coaxing a broken hinge back into shape with a hammer too big for his hand. He wore his father's hat now, not by blood, but by right, and dirt clung to his elbows and cheeks like it knew where it belonged. Inside the cabin, the table had worn grooves where elbows leaned too many times and where spoons had scraped through winters and springs. There were scuff marks on the floor where boots had paced, and a string of dried apples hung, pitched by the window catching the light. He stepped out onto the porch, coffee steaming in a tin cup, and watched them for a long while. His beard had gone silver at the edges. His limp was a little worse after each hard season, but he still moved like the land owed him something, and he wasn't done collecting. Behind him, Eliza was mending a shirt. Her fingers worked the needles slow but sure. The quiet between them wasn't silence anymore. It was comfort. Things unsaid didn't weigh as much when you'd carried them long enough together. She looked up once, catching him staring at the kids. They've grown. Faster than spring grass. She smiled, barely, and went back to her stitching. Later, after chores and supper, they all sat out back where the stars came close enough to touch. Clara lay on the porch boards with her arms folded under her head. Tommy dozed with his head in Eliza's lap. He handed her the tin box. She opened it, careful. Inside, a photo, faded, black and white, edges curled with time. The four of them, Clara standing tall, hand on her hip, Tommy mid-laugh, hair sticking up, Eliza still as stone. And him, expression unreadable, like he didn't know quite how to fit in the frame. She traced the edge of the picture with her thumb. We look like we belong. He nodded once. Maybe we do. Then, slow as the tide rolls in, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't breathe for a long while. In the morning, he carved their names into a post beside the door. Not big, not loud, just enough to say, we were here. The land stretched wide beneath a pewter sky, wind curling through the tall grass like it had somewhere to be, though it never seemed to get there. The hills rolled on, soft and endless, patched with winter frost and the last clinging color of autumn. Somewhere far off, a hawk called once, then fell silent. From a distance, the cabin looked smaller now, less like a refuge, more like a part of the land itself, weathered, quiet, not trying to stand tall anymore, just holding. A figure stepped out onto the porch. He walked slower these days, favoring his right leg more than ever, but he didn't wince. He'd stopped feeling most of the pain long ago. It had just become part of him, like the scar across his ribs or the silver threading through his beard. He set a pail down by the rail, leaned on it for a spell, and watched the wind roll in. Tommy would be back soon, off chasing a rusted axle from town with a rig half put together and more grit than sense. Clara was married now. Lived up near the foothills with a man who spoke little and worked hard. She rode down when she could, brought preserves and questions he couldn't always answer. Eliza had passed the winter before, pneumonia, quiet and fast. She'd gone in her sleep, fingers still curled around the quilt she'd sewn herself when they were just learning how to live together without flinching. He hadn't cried. Not in front of anyone. He'd just stacked more wood, sharpened the tools, and put her name alongside the others on the post. The wind tugged at the edge of his coat. He looked out across the valley, jaw set like stone. He thought he was rescuing them from the storm. The voice came, his voice older now, quieter, like a thought riding the wind itself. But it turned out they'd rescued him. He didn't smile, but something in his shoulders eased. A crow took flight from the fence post. Snow began to fall, soft, lazy flakes that spun in the hush. This time it wasn't a storm, just weather.